There were 5 events. First, the contestants had to learn by heart a 50-line unpublished poem called The Tapestry of Me. Then they were provided with 95 photographic headshots, accompanied by first and last names, and given 15 minutes to memorize as many of these as possible. Then they had another 15 minutes to memorize a list of 300 random words. 5 minutes to memorize a page of 1,000 random digits, 25 lines of numbers, 40 numbers to a line, and 5 minutes to learn the order of a shuffled deck of playing cards. Among the competitors were 2 of the world's 36 Grand Masters of Memory. A rank attained by memorizing a sequence of 1,000 random digits in under an hour. The precise order of 10 shuffled decks of playing cards in the same amount of time. And the order of one shuffled deck in less than 2 minutes. Though on the face of it, these feats might seem like little more than geeky party tricks, essentially useless, and perhaps vaguely pathetic. What I discovered as I talked to the competitors was something far more serious, a story that made me reconsider the limits of my own mind and the very essence of my education. I asked Ed Cook, a young grandmaster from England who had come to the U.S. event as spring training for the summer World Championship. Since he was a non-American, his score couldn't be counted in the U.S. contest. When he first realized he was a savant, "Oh, I'm not a savant," he said shockingly. "Photographic memory?" I asked. He chuckled again. "Photographic memory is a distable myth," he said. "Doesn't exist, in fact. My memory is quite average. All of us here have average memory. That seems hard to square with the fact that I just watched him recite back 252 random digits as effortlessly as if he'd been his own telephone number, as if it had been his own telephone number." What you have to understand is that even average memories are remarkably powerful, if used properly, he said. Ed had a blocky face and a shoulder-length mop of curly brown hair, and could be counted among the competitors who were least concerned with the habits of personal grooming. He was wearing a suit with a loosened tie and, in contrastly, a pair of flip-flops embossed with a Union Jack. He was 24 years old, but carried his body like someone 3 times his age. He hobbled about with a cane at his side, a winning prop, he called it, which was necessitable by the recent painful relapse of chronic juvenile arthritis. He and all the other mental athletes I met kept insisting, as Ben Pridmore had in the interview, that anyone could do what they do. It was simply a matter of learning to think in more memorable ways. Using the extraordinary simple 2,500-year-old mnemonic technique known as the memory palace that Simon of Chios had supersededly invented in the rubble of the great banquet hall collapse. The techniques of memory palace, also known as the journey method or the method of Loci, and more broadly as the ars or vita or art of memory, were refined and codified in an extensive set of rules and instruction manuals by Romans like Cicero and and flowered in the Middle Ages as a way for pious to memorize everything from sermons and prayers to the punishments awaiting the wicked in hell. These were the same tricks that Roman senators had used to memorize their speeches, that the Athenian statesman Skakos had supposedly used to memorize the names of 20,000 Athenians, and that medieval scholars had used to remember the entire books. Ed explained to me that the competitors saw themselves as participants in an amateur research program whose aim was to rescue a long-lost tradition of memory training that had disappeared centuries ago. Once upon a time, Ed insisted remembering was everything. A trained memory was not just a handy tool, but a fundamental facet to any worldly mind. What's more, memory training has considered a form of character building, a way of developing an cardinal virtue to produce, and by extension, ethics. Only through memorizing the thinking could ideas truly be incorporated into one's psyche and their values absorbed. The techniques insisted not just to memorize useless information like decks of playing cards, but also to etch into the brain foundational texts and ideas. But then, in the 15th century, Gutenberg came along and turned books into mass production commodities, and eventually it was no longer all that important to remember what the printed page could remember for you. Memory techniques that had once been a staple of classical and medieval culture got warped up with occult and esoteric hermetic traditions of the Renaissance, and by the 19th century, they have been relegated to carnival sideshows and tacky self-help books, only to be resurrected at the last decades of the 20th century for this bizarre and singular competition. The leader of this Renaissance and memory training is a slick 67-year-old British educator and self-styled guru named Tony Buzan, who claims to have the highest creativity quotient in the world. When I met him in the cafeteria of the Con Edison building, he was wearing a navy suit with 5 enormous gold-rimmed buttons on the collar of the shirt, with another large button at his throat that gave him the ear of an Eastern priest. A neuron-shaped pin aboard his lapel. His wash face bore a reproduction of a Dali persistence of memory, the one with a dripping wash face. He referred to the competitors as warriors of the mind. Buzan's grizzled face looked a decade older than his 67-year-old, but the rest of him was as trim as the 30-year-old. He rows between 6 and 10 kilometers every morning on the river Thames. He told me, and he makes a point of eating a lot of brain-healthy vegetables and fish. Junk food and junk brain. Healthy food, healthy brain. He said when he walked, Buzan seemed to glide across the floor like an air hockey puck. The result, he later told me, of 40 years training in the Alexander technique. When he spoke, he gesticulated with a polished staccato precision that could only have been honed in front of a mirror often. He punctuated a key point with an explosion of fingers from his closed fist.